Okay, well, good afternoon and namaste, everybody. We are entering a panel that's titled Inclusive Learning for Future. So before I ask, I request everybody to introduce themselves, or in other words, briefly say what do they think the world they should know them as. Before I do that, and they can think about what they want to say, we'll make this conversation a little inclusive, and I'll give you a puzzle. And and give you 1 minute to come up with an answer, okay? Here's the puzzle. So think about digits, 0 to 9, okay? You can take these digits, make numbers if you want out of it. You are only allowed to use plus or minus, and make an equation that ends up in 100. So 98 plus 2, something like that. You can use each digit only once, and if you can use more digits, more power to you. Okay, your time starts now. It's 43:22 here. And 60 seconds. Yeah? Okay, all right. Okay, now you can share with a neighbor if you'd like what your answer was. You can share with your dad if you want. Okay, some people are able to share with their neighbors. Okay, here's a question for you. How many people here came up with the same answer? Their neighbor's answer is the same as their answer. Not really, okay. But each of you still needed to think a bit. Yes? Okay. That is what inclusive learning looks like. Let's get started. Let's start all the way from my extreme left, Mohan Das, and then we will go online at the very end, just in case. Yeah.
What do you want?
Well, how do you want the world to know you?
Well, I want the world to know me as a good Indian who helped make India better.
All right. Meenal?
Yeah, I would want the world to know me as somebody who equips students with skills relevant for the 21st century and empowers them to believe that they can achieve whatever they set their mind to achieve.
Okay.
So I'll say it in 2 sentences.
Say.
One, as an alumnus, it's very proud to be sitting here instead of sitting there. So that's a wonderful moment, number one. And second, I want to be known as somebody who's working and want to be achieving inclusive learning for millions of children in the country.
Okay, fantastic. We'll go to you. Okay, here.
I don't know about the world part, but मुझे लगता है हिंदी में allow. Can I speak in Hindi? Yeah. Inclusive.
Yes.
ठीक है. वो क्या मन की बात मातृभाषा में निकलेगी. No, I don't know about the world part, but मुझे लगता है कि मैं जो कर रहा हूँ वो जो पाठ्यक्रम की जो नीरस और बोरिंग चीज़ें हैं उसको किस तरह से अपन दूर कर सकते हैं. How can we bring back that gleam in the eyes of our children? 19,200 घंटे की खिचड़ी खिलाते हैं. 8 घंटा रोज, 200 दिन, 12 साल, गुणा कर लीजिए, और उसमें वो IIT की कोचिंग और बाकी सारी खिचड़ी नहीं जोड़ी है. And imagine if this khichdi, if I add some interesting, whatever else, right? इतनी सारी पढ़ाई IISc के कैंपस में बाहर खाना खाने के लिए गया. It was just fascinating, right? If we bring that stuff inside my classrooms, it becomes so much enjoyable. वो खिचड़ी जरूरी है, पाठ्यक्रम के साथ वो कार्बोहाइड्रेट जरूरी हैं, बट उसमें थोड़ा सा मसाला, ढोकला, जलेबी, खाकरा डाल दें, तब वो खाने लायक हो जाता है. That is what I enjoy doing. I don't know how the world knows or not, but वो करने में मुझे अच्छा लगता है, and I want to share that with whoever is interested.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So people you are seeing on dais, all the way from Mohan Pai, Meenal, Majumdar, Jagadish, Babu, Professor Manish Jain, and online Siddharth Jha. Siddharth, you want to say how you would like the world to know you?
Thank you. I would like to be known as someone who is passionate about using technology for good and putting people in the center.
Host Chintan, Vaishnav, and once again this conversation is about inclusive learning. Hope you are on the right flight. So let's start with this question. Let's formulate the problem for people, right? There are many people in the audience and many more online. What does inclusive learning mean to you, and what problem is worth solving in this space? Whoever wants to go first is welcome to start.
I'll make the big question.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's understand the scale of the problem of learning in school. We'll forget college for now. There are 30 crore children in the age group of 6 to 18. No country in the world has faced this problem, will face this problem, will ever solve this problem. So we have to create an inclusive system of education where every child gets 12 years of minimum education in a joyful way which fulfills the curiosity of the child and makes the child feel that it is worthwhile to spend his or her time. And it must meet the requirement of the child and be student-centric. Now for that, first we need access. Do we have enough schools to do that? Yes, we have nearly enough schools. We have 26.5 crore kids in school, and out of 100 kids who come to class 1, 80 finish class 10, complete class 10, pass or fail, 60 I think pass, and about 56 go to class 11 and 12 and pass. We must bring it up to 100%. So they must have 12 years of school. Second, they must get good quality school education. Now what is good quality school education? Well, something that gives them the necessary skills and ability to work as good citizens of this country and to realize their dream. It's a very big statement, but I'm sure all of us understand that. That is the next. Do we have good quality? We must ensure good quality. Third, everybody should have the tools of good education, like good textbooks, maybe a tablet with good rich multimedia software, maybe all the kits to exercise the mind like the doctor has here, and everything else. So we must give them the tools to enhance their skills and to do that. If we're able to do that in a very broad way, we would have achieved very good inclusive education for all children. Nobody should be left behind, but we are not a Finland. We are a poor country. We only spend 6 lakh crores to government or states and colleges and states and center on this. We don't have enough money. We can't have a swimming pool in every school like some schools in Delhi and all that. But we should be able to give good education to children. So end of 12 years of schooling, they can come into society as confident individuals.
Okay. Anybody else wants to add dimensions to that?
I actually thought that most of the things, so I will just tell you a brief story which we started about 3 weeks back, and maybe we could play that 2-minute video. This is in 746 schools of UP. Most underprivileged schools of UP, KGBV, Kasturba Gandhi Balika Vidyalaya, residential schools, 100 girls per school. And when we started this program, we thought, यार यहाँ पर क्या कर सकते हैं? ये तो बहुत ज़्यादा economically backward school है, in terms of the resources, in terms of the children who come there. And because of this our experience during these COVID times, with just 3 rooms in Gandhinagar, we had 70,000 kids in the whole of every district along the UP. And there are no resources, very few resources. The kind of things that that you see here, they had none of those. And just with using simple straw, Simple paper, simple, cycle spoke and dropper and bottles. They could just do such amazing stuff in their classes that they started coming back to the classes. We have done 8 classes like that. 70,000 kids are joining every week, twice, Tuesdays and Fridays, twice a week for an hour. Now, I believe, agar hum ye sari cheezein UP mein kar sakte hain, and this has started about 4 weeks back, multiply that by 10 or by 100 by 1,000. This is just out of 3 rooms in Gandhinagar, all because of internet and our experience during pandemic times of reaching out. But this is possible only because we are looking at curriculum in a manner that children can relate to. जिंदगी से जुड़ा हुआ है, और वो जब तक नहीं करेंगे तब तक पाठ्यक्रम पास तो हो जाते हैं हमारे बच्चे, लेकिन समझ क्या आता है. मोहन दास जी, वो whatever he was saying, I think makes so much more sense to me, which is and this is something that came out of the PISA results. We took part in 2009. The results came out in 2012. They said 80% of the children did not make, school to gaye, 19,200 घंटे की खिचड़ी खाई, लेकिन जिंदगी में कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ा. So one of the pillars I would like to add is that 12 hours of education, 12 years of education, did it make a difference in my life? Whichever way it is, getting me a job, this, that, whatever, opening up my mind. And I think if we can sort of get there, I would just be, that is a pillar I would like to add. So,
okay.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Great, great. Any other pillars to add?
Yes. So adding to what the 2 panelists just said, basically around 8 months ago, we had the same thing in the pandemic, reached out to around 250 students in a suburb in Mumbai, Andheri, and started, and these were largely girls. They hadn't used a laptop before or any device, and we started with teaching them basically how to use the laptop and basic digital literacy skills like Microsoft Word, Office, and that was the start of 9 months ago. From there, we moved on to, teaching them Scratch. So just around a month ago, when we were kind of taking their progress, one of the girls had to share this, was that, until now, मेरे घर में हम लोग अभी pandemic में, download करते थे games और फिर खेलते थे. Now my whole family waits for me to develop games on Scratch and plays. And my family and friends keep asking me, when am I going to develop the next game? And they're addicted and hooked onto the games that I'm playing. And that for me is, basically that girl is, and the other thing is she's teaching her friends. So she's also mentoring other kids and creating a system, of people where she's learned and then she's downloading that learning onto other people. So I think that is inclusive in a sense where, as he said, it has to be relevant and joyous. So that I think is what
you have added another pillar of creation to the narrative so far. Anyone else, Siddharth or Jagadish?
Yeah. What, Siddharth? Shall I? Yeah.
I would like to build upon that and say that we have already mentioned that inclusive education needs to meet every single learner where they are, whatever be their background, and we can be extremely ambitious about that, so that no one is left behind. The other important point that was mentioned just now, and I would like to build upon, is that we need to radically engage the ecosystem. Like, I think it was mentioned about family members. So family members, administrators, other community-based actors are resources that are available. Even senior students, university students are resources that are available to bootstrap the whole system. So that's one important pillar. The third pillar of radical inclusion is actually think about what needs to be included, because this is about inclusive education for the future, to set the learners up for success in today's world and in the future. And this means rethinking what the purpose of education is, and if what is being taught, and Jagadish ji mentioned this very eloquently, if we need to add new things to what we are actually giving to students in our schools. And these are the pillars of radical inclusion that I would like to see reflected. Thank you.
Build on Mohan's view as well as Manish's, as well as Siddharth's. I just want to kind of give it a little bit more detail, right? Basically, just building on the larger context that was shared, we are a country of millions of contexts, right? You cannot say, I designed something. Most likely, you are designing for the context you are familiar with. But that you expect it to work across other contexts is not a direct supposition. Right? First, contextual, right? And that means that inclusive means you are designing, as a system design principle, you have multi-context in your mind from the day one. That's one, what it means to be inclusive. Of course, the NEP specifically calls out for socially, economically disadvantaged as a very important focus area. One has to, that's an important context, but it's a very broad context. Again, there are many contexts within, right? The third dimension is that we are not looking at a learner as an individual, colorless entity. There are many learning styles, like Manish possibly would show off some of the tools that are appealing to certain learning styles, and then there are many different learning styles. It's not about one learning style that you want to apply to all. That's also not homogeneous. And finally, the last two parts that what it means to be inclusive is, when you look at a cohort, let's say this room full of students, everybody is at different levels of preparedness to receive the learning. Right? The inclusivity means that I should be able to take them along and manage the diversity of learning levels in the classroom, and not look at it as one single learning level, that exists. Right? And the last is to make sure the whole solution lands as in a very familiar territory to people. That's what inclusive means. What is very familiar to people? Last panel, Pranav from Flipkart was talking about in the health session, that cell phone is the means to get to imaging for millions, because that's what is there in everybody's hand. Can I leverage it to make imaging work for me? That's like a very familiar process. Or a QR code to scan payment is a very familiar process, right? So what is very familiar and landing in that context means inclusive.
Great. Well, that's a wonderful array of thoughts on inclusivity. Now, people in the audience who are highly skillful and are looking for problems to solve, you will see that in each of these pillars, like Mohan Das started us off with, there's a way to numerically articulate a gap that you can go after, right? This 100% inclusive of all that we're talking about. One of the things that in my job at Atal Innovation Mission that I am having to do is to think about inclusive innovation. And the way I have so far come to think about it is that anything that ought not to be a barrier for innovation shouldn't be a barrier. That's inclusive. So whether it's language, whether it's geography, whatever it is, right? So let me add one more dimension to this first question, and that is on disability. Recently, we have been working on innovations for disability, but I was really, really surprised to know that in India, for example, 1 in 12 families experience somebody with disability. Here's a question for you again as an audience, that, you know, when somebody says disability, how many disabilities can you think about? 3, 5, whatever that number is in your mind. The official count recognized is 21. So this is a much wider spectrum when it comes to disability. And only 0.9% of all children with disability are actually enrolled in school. Think about the gap. This is a humongous gap, right? That we have to do something about in terms of taking people along. And 70% of those who are enrolled are in rural areas. So urban areas are actually doing much worse than rural areas when it comes to disability. So that's another pillar that we can go after. Let's come to this idea of what Jagadish was talking about, that this idea of personalization, for example, catering to the different learning styles, the abilities, all of that, right? That begins to speak to technology. So here's the next question. What is technology doing to learning, and if you want to stretch to inclusive learning? Anybody, any order?
You know, Chintan, before we go there, I want to add something.
No, add, please.
You know, what are the qualities of heart and mind should a child have after completing 12 years? Because you must go back to basic questions. First is a problem-solving attitude, critical thinking, ability to analyze data, ability to be logical. These are the attributes that you must imbibe in the child. We almost get carried away by content Content is secondary because content is now available. It's not in books, it's in a medium. Second thing is social skills, communication, empathy, compassion, values, and ability to sit down together with people and negotiate with each other and to do something. And the third thing is a physical persona. A child should be able to play and communicate because physically human beings need to have a physique. And that is something that we are developing in a child. A child cannot be kept in isolation anywhere else. That's a very important attribute. And the last point, which is very, very important, is to make the child retain the curiosity. Now, once a child has curiosity, the child will always find an answer. And curiosity is very important, and curiosity only comes if you allow the innate creativity of a child to come out. Now, what does Doc do about all this? The creativity is coming out. What is it doing about personalization? It is catering to the creativity of every child. What's she talking about, that young girl doing something? She's very creative and she's doing something and she gets an opportunity. We're able to do all these attributes and design a schooling system will work. That means the content should be reduced, so there's more self-discovery. The pedagogy should be done in a way where it's not a one-way broadcast, but multi-class broadcast with discussion, children coming and sharing together. And then, like the NEP says, there must be social interaction with society, so they become part of the community, they understand the community better. And then, by making them come out and express themselves and allowing free expression, we're creating a confident young individual. Now, to me, all these are part of the inclusiveness, and technology is an input in all of them to accelerate. For example, creativity. We all accept every child is not the same, correct? Every child is at a different level of studying or whatever it is. Every child has interest. Now, using technology, we can allow the child to indulge itself in the areas of interest to an extraordinary degree and do things much better, and make sure that they feel happy about doing things. They, of course, have to do some other small subjects to pass and all that, which you have to do. But you can indulge yourself in a large number, right? And then, level of learning. Because you have tools, which technology gives you tools, you can be at A level, B level, C level, you can catch up or go up and down. You know that Ramanujam could not pass those history exam as something that he could do, right? But he wanted to do in mathematics, right? He almost didn't get his degree. How do you take care of all these gifted children? So with the design, like he said, the system design cannot be centralized, cannot be one role, but technology can create the differentiation, because in any large system, some kind of structure is essential. Some kind of rigidity is essential, because we can't execute otherwise. Now, that is what I think technology brings to the table.
So I think you have, in some ways, taken us on a nice detour. We'll follow it a bit. So this, you are saying essentially that unless we build this base layer of this kind of a person that one has to nurture, you can't really build a big building on top of it, because your foundation is so inadequate. Are we as a system going in the right direction for it? Will implementing NEP just liberate us? Or do we have to do many more things?
Chintan, what NEP does in my reading is, it gives autonomy to the school. NEP is a set of principles, but gives autonomy to the school. Yes, at the end of it, there's a board exam you have to pass, with kids get bored to do. But it gives a framework. Now, how do we enable the school to use that framework to do all the things? How can they be a school where the professors can do all this and teach? How can be a school where she can bring all the genius she has in her work? How can be a school where he can bring one EkStep to redesign the curriculum, enable the teacher to do many things? That is the school autonomy that you must do. And for that purpose, NEP is a framework. It's not a rigid architecture like earlier, which says do A, B, C, D and nothing more. Right? It's a framework. But the framework can only be used in an autonomous way if the school has the capability to design and do all the experiments that are required, and the teaching load is less, and the examination load is less. Today, there is too much of content, too much of focus on content, because the content was required in the industrial era, where the content was in books, and only a few had the content. Now, all the content in the world is available on the internet for free. All you must teach the kid is how to search, right, Prof? How to search, put the keywords, and you get the content. So why should you put it into a hard disk? Why should you memorize that? Why should a teacher come and do? Teach the principles behind all that and give a broad outlay and reduce the content, allow the child to experiment. Can we design this for 1.6 million schools? Maybe not. Can we design it for, like you have done, Atal Tinkering Lab, 10,000? Wonderful. Can you go to 100,000? Yes. So for that purpose, my last point is, we must have devolution to the grassroots and to the school in a significant way. The multiple models come up based on the genius of the people of the particular place. What works in UP will not work in Bangalore. What works in Kerala will not work in the Northeast. Right? I mean, that is what he's saying. So the system design should be such, and the technology will give you the tools to do the system design like EkStep is doing, like what you're doing.
Yeah. Okay, so you're raising fascinating questions about architecture, which I will, for the moment, not chase. But let's ask Meenal a question. That do you see schools receptive to these ideas in your work? Can you say a bit about it?
Yeah, so here actually I wanted to answer exactly this question. So while we are saying that this is what NEP should do and we want schools to follow it, they are really challenged by the fact that they don't have teachers to take it forward. And that is, and what you rightly said, that we are still doing content-focused education, and we are not going to skill-focused education, which would result in a problem-solving or a child with curiosity induced, and where he's actually setting up to be creative, or she's setting up to be creative. Unfortunately, there's this big divide between what is there today in schools because they're focusing on content, and also the schools can't change to that even if they want to, because they don't have the teachers to support that system in the scale that they want to. So clearly teacher training is, or finding resources to bridge that gap is going to be a challenge, and where I think, again, Atal Tinkering Labs are there, where we are having at least the tools that are set up, but again the mentors, there's a big gap. So I think that's one huge gap that needs to be addressed.
And say a bit about what kind of things you're trying to do with schools, just to concretize the,
Yes.
provide the context. Yeah.
Yes, so essentially it's a very NAP-driven and skill-building focused curriculum that I'm doing with various schools across the range, right from private schools, but also more focus on government schools and schools with which have lesser privileged kids going in. So there, the idea is to ensure that you get the digital, to bridge the digital divide, and the pandemic has just worsened it, right? So essentially, how do we, and kids are seeing this, basically they have access to internet and they have access to technology, so they know what is happening in the world. So it's not that in the earlier era where they didn't know what was happening, and they're curious and hungry for that. So the same example, so when I said I started this project 9 months ago, some of them, we introduced them to robotics, and these kids took it to, I can't even tell you how amazingly they took it. That this weekend, I was at Pune yesterday and day before for the National Robotics Competition, and the runners-up for the competition was a team from Salam Bombay, an NGO which I mentored, which won the International First Tech Challenge, which basically they had to make robots out of, proper robots. They were not Arduino-based, they were actually, a higher version of robots, and they did it themselves, right from designing, programming them, and the opposition teams were teams from, international schools, and they were they went to the finals. I wish I can show that video over here actually. And I was surprised that 9 months when we started, they didn't know how to use a laptop. So they're hungry for it. In fact, they came back, and the other thing was the coordinator of the NGO kept telling me that, you're doing this, but they have exams, they're grade 10 students, they won't come. They didn't miss even one single day of school, whereas these private schools where they had classes, they never came. So actually, I could see, in the same center, I trained 7 teams, 3 from NGOs and 4 from regular schools, and the NGO kids came every single day, practiced 3 to 4 hours a day, and they had very basic robots, because obviously we didn't have the money to have very sophisticated, wheels, like mechanism wheels were used in the other robot, and these are very standard wheels, for example. But these simple robots did far better than these very engineered robots did, because the kids, while they built the robots, but they didn't have time to practice and things like that. So the hunger that is there, I could see it. Like, for example, when we started the program, these kids had researched on it, like what needs to be done. They used to come and tell me that, auntie, this is what we have to do. Humko aise karna hai. So I was like, yes, go on. And yesterday after we left Pune, they were like, when can we come next? And I'm like, yes, of course, you're going to do something more. So I think they are receptive. It's just that exposure is the challenge and not ability.
If it is done the right way also, we'll come to Manish in a moment, but I do want to ask Siddharth online. You are seeing this type of acceptance of such ideas in a very different culture across in Europe. Could you say a bit about what you are experiencing?
Yeah, so first of all, what we see and with our global footprint is that this idea of what new themes need to be included is extremely important. For example, problem-based learning, project-based learning at schools and also in middle schools. A lot of the global crises, they are basically a crisis of perception. And that we have, and this begins in schools, climate crisis or other things. So what we are seeing is a lot of push around the world on themes like sustainability, systems thinking, design thinking, which are all these meta aspects of learning coming into schools. So we support projects which are looking at food systems in schools, social innovation labs arising in schools to plant some of these ideas. So that's one thing. The second thing that we see also in Europe is basically strengthening the agency of the learner. How can you put the learner in charge? And this starts very much at the primary school level here, in Europe. How do you make them self-sufficient? And there, I think also technology has a huge role to play. I mean, if we can take a step back on that technology question, I think the real role of technology in education is to humanize it, to make the learner a better learner, to augment their capacity as learners, to augment the capacity of teachers as teachers, by freeing up time for everyone from tasks that they should not be doing, like finding out, memorizing facts or grading assignments. So long-term view is that. In the short term, we also see a digital enabling of teaching workforce. How can we enable, that's a low-hanging fruit as far as technology and education system is concerned. How can we rapidly upgrade hundreds of thousands of teachers by digitally enabling them? So digital content delivery to students is one thing, but keeping teachers up to the mark so that we can support them in delivering that content is also extremely important. Plus, one more thing I would like to say is that technology really, on that question of technology, we are seeing this a little bit. In the beginning, you need partners in the ecosystem to do that, but in the long run, and the real thing is technology can really help to meet the learners where they are. A student who needs 10 hours of time to solve a problem can be given that time with technology through online classrooms. So it helps us come away from one size fits all. So that's the major, the bigger paradigm shift that we are seeing globally. As well. Thank you.
Great. So I think that has spoken to several questions that I actually had. So let's look at, let's touch and feel a few things. Let's go to Manish. Manish, you are in the business of opening minds. Can you talk to a few examples?
And so I really liked what Mohan was saying in terms of curiosity. And I think we are very inclusive. In terms of education, we are inclusive because I think we are all inclusive, whether it's the economic higher strata or lower. We are inclusive in not raising the curiosity. We are inclusive in not, for instance, I'll give you this example, right? Everybody looks at this piece of paper called the A4 paper. Right? So what I'm saying is we'll have to handhold our teachers to implement NEP. We will have to do those things. Dimag ki batti jala de. Why do we call it A4? Why not we call it A whatever? If you also notice, the length of that paper is 29.297 millimeter. Now it made me beg, yaar, 3 millimeter और जोड़ देते, अच्छा खासा 30 centimeter हो जाता. Why did they deduct 3 mm for it to make my life miserable? If somebody asks me to calculate the area, I'm screwed because, I have to multiply 29.7 times, whatever, 30 कर देते, आसान हो जाता. Now, these are things that I see daily in my life every single day. If I start doing some of those things, and it doesn't cost any money, भारत सरकार से कोई अनुदान मांगने की जरूरत नहीं है. एक A4 पेपर हर बच्चे के पास है. एक साधारण से कैलेंडर के अंदर इतनी सारी गणित की चीज़ें हो जाती हैं, हर क्लास में एक कैलेंडर पड़ा हुआ है. वी डिड दिस प्रोग्राम एंड आई एंड विद दैट, वी कॉल्ड इट 30-30 STEM. पैंडमिक में कुछ करने के लिए नहीं था, खाली बैठे थे. एंड सो जगदीश एंड आई हैड अ लॉन्ग कॉन्वर्सेशन ऑन दैट, एंड वी कॉल्ड इट 30-30 बिकॉज वी सेड वी विल डू दिस ऑन यूट्यूब एंड वी हैड एग्जैक्टली 3030 सब्सक्राइबर्स. सो वी कॉल्ड इट 30-30. And we did this every Sunday 4 to 5 on YouTube free. जिसको मर्जी देखो, YouTube कोई पैसा नहीं. By the end of it we had 2.5 lakhs and 1 crore people had watched, because हमने कहा कि पाठ्यक्रम में जिंदगी का तड़का, something interesting. Can you draw a triangle on a mosami?
On a Mosambi.
And you will realize that the angle is always greater than 180 degree. क्लासों में लिख लिख के रटा दिया 180 होता है, नहीं होता 180. It depends on what you draw on, and many other things, right? विराट कोहली छक्का मारे या आप मारे या मैं मारूं या धोनी मारे, right? And something, this is something we were talking at dinner. I feel one of the three things and this is by doing this 30-30 program, which we were surprised, हिंदी में करा 1 करोड़ लोगों ने देखा. We realized that 3 basic pillars of what we'll have to, in my opinion, do in the classes. पहला, धमाल. You know this हिंदी picture धमाल. मजा आया कि नहीं? धमाल पिक्चर. सेकेंड, समझ आया कि नहीं तारे ज़मीन पर? कुछ समझ भी आया. एंड थर्ड, समवेयर आई रियलाइज दैट इट्स नॉट जस्ट द कंटेंट, यू हैव टू नॉट कनेक्ट विद द माइंड बट विद द हार्ट. 3 Idiots. तो वो पढ़ाई जो दिमाग को तो छू रही है लेकिन दिल को छूनी चाहिए. आप इस क्लास में आए, 42 मिनट मेरा भाषण सुन लिया, आपको क्या लगा, क्यों आए थे? आज कुछ नया होगा. I mean, I'm repeating the dialogue, but what I'm trying to say is that is what a teacher should feel, in my opinion, and a student who comes to the class that they feel. कंटाल आता है आज क्लास में जाने में, and that कंटाल has to be removed, in my opinion. Most important, नंबर तो आ जाएंगे, 75 साल से नंबर आ रहे हैं हमारे. So, कंटाल is bore. Yeah. So I see this time just on my head, so I'll stop.
Okay, these contraptions are for everybody to enjoy when we finish the session here. But we have at least one school student in this audience who who is here only because we are doing an inclusive education session, learning session. If you have any questions, we are open to it. Were answered?
Yes,
dear.
Had a couple of questions. I actually had a couple of questions before I came into the session.
Yeah.
But then they were answered.
They were answered. Oh my God, we even succeeded before you asked your questions. That's fantastic. Okay, let me ask the final question. We have about 2.5 minutes. What is the most radical thing we can do with artificial intelligence to make learning inclusive, in your opinion?
Well, give every child a personalized chatbot, and that will be, some kind of a substitute, because we interact with people. It's like the Gurukul, right? The Gurukul worked because there was a teacher, few students, they interacted, spoke. Try to do that in the way of a chatbot, where the child can ask a question, child will get an answer, child can do a program, and it will prompt you on. It is going to be difficult, but I'm sure Umakant can do that.
Okay, that's one vision. Any other visions?
Okay, so 2 things, right? Just building off the previous question, right? The previous question that was there. From a NEP perspective, which Mohanji started off with, if you see what Government of India has done as NDR, National Digital Education Architecture, which is now being followed even by the higher education, and now recently by the Skills Ministry launching DISH, the larger inclusive skilling, credentialing system, right? I think some of the points that the other panelists spoke of, but just before that, I wanted to make sure one point, to me at least, is super clear from my point of view. Personalization, where meeting the learner where is not about giving a device to the student. It's not about that. It's not about having a computer in everybody's hand. It's not about that. It's about making sure more and more contexts are served. And first, given our scale of what we have, number of teachers, first of all, 12 million teachers, there, right? Digitally enabling teaching workforce, which he talked about, right? Which NDR talks about in 2 interactions, of 3 interactions. Manage, learn, help, learn. is the teacher side of it. First, automation, technology, bringing to that side of the world to free up their time, right? That is the first part. Right? There's a lot of solutions there. One example I want to talk about, which could be, you can call it future, but it is in the current present tense, right? In 2 states in the country, now going to 6 states, teachers use a simple phone, a contextual OCR technology, to scan, so far, 60 million assessments, which converts into correct, highly precise data, without needing them to know technology. Because towards enabling them to teach, making them do computer savvy and all of that is a long shot, right? Putting the technology to work out there is one example. Now that makes data of assessment digital so that managed learn can become more efficient, right? In real time. So that you know how many different levels of learners are there, how many contexts exist in my classroom. First you need to know, otherwise today I see one homogeneous classroom. The second example of technology at work, which Vivek may have spoken in the morning session, is making language easy. Where the language building blocks that are out there, which NDR again talks about building block approach, where you do not build solutions, you build building blocks and contribute so that solutions, contextual solutions can show up. This is some important AI building blocks that should show up now, but language as an example, where both for speaking, recognizing the writing, and recognizing the written. This is where I see one example of magic that can happen because of AI. Apart from AI leveraging, bringing us insights for the data that we are already collecting. Right? Of course, a lot of things have to happen in terms of standardizing the way we collect data, that we interoperable systems, that which NDR talks about in a very big way, the principles for it. But those are the areas that I see AI can help, eventually making many of the learning problems that bother us today irrelevant. Could that happen? I see that future ahead of me.
Okay, excellent. Any other radical thoughts to add?
I got one after they finish.
I don't know. I have actually mixed thoughts about AI in education or whatever. I see, I read all this data and I get confused. I see OPEC, OECD coming up with a study saying, in the US and America, everybody has 1.5 laptops per children, and last 10 years their math grades have not improved a bit. And, I'm not saying we have the same context. We are way far behind. We need people to get interesting content. And for that, like I saw the board when we move up, it said, Umakant's board, which said so many people didn't have access, 80% of the children didn't have access to devices. So all of that is required. But at the same time, I feel like I really believe that the connection that a teacher has with the child is one of the most supreme thing. And that, I don't know whether AI can do it. Matlab, I worked with Arvind Gupta and he used to say, Manish, training to gadhon aur khachron ki hoti hai, insano ko to prerit kiya ja sakta hai. So, and that I think, and these are by the way not my words. So if you have a problem with gadhe khachar, you have to go back, talk to him. But I really believe कि teacher का role सिर्फ one of the most important roles, और इसलिए NEP में सबसे ज़रूरी है टीचरों के ऊपर ध्यान देना. वी हैव टू हैंड होल्ड देम टू डू मोर क्रिएटिव. कल से नहीं बोल सकते आप कल से क्रिएटिव हो जाओ जी, NEP में लिख दिया कल से चालू क्रिएटिविटी. I mean, we'll have to work with them, we'll have to handhold them, do things whatever it takes. And so I don't know what I frankly don't know what AI other role can AI play there.
Okay, perfect. So it's all in the pot. So that's wonderful. Yeah. Any thoughts?
I just actually wanted to add to him, saying that I completely believe in the fact that kids, especially till I think grade 9 or 10, do require a physical teacher's presence to inspire them, and also to ensure that learning is engaging and it happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
My view is education, inclusive education, if you want to use the word, is a management challenge. It's not a pedagogy, it is not a technology, it's a management challenge. Mm-hmm. And the way to tackle this is very simple in my view. We have more than 720 districts. Take one district as an autonomous area. There'll be 20 lakh people, maybe 3.5, 4 lakh students across class 1 to 12, 25 to 30,000 in each class. and there develop that management capacity to manage the district by getting in innovators and working with them and focusing only on the district with little bit of a framework from somewhere like Bangalore. Now when Delhi rules India, Bangalore rules Karnataka, there is no hope. But everything is centralized here and the local level they can do nothing. Inspectors come, everybody comes, pressurize them and destroys everything. Give them full freedom, set up parents and others to monitor education, give them the tools and their training can be done, everything can be done and they will be autonomous. And once competition starts between districts, you're going to see magic. For example, in the US, you know very well, you go to a school district where the education is very good and get a job there so your child can get a good education, right? And that's the most important thing for any family. So we got to decentralize the education, change the management structure, put it down at the district, and within the district, maybe at taluka level, put in management structures there, and then all the things that we said can be put into place. You have in every district 10 Atal tinkering labs. Everybody can come there. They can travel around, right? I mean, I think we got to rethink the entire structure, Meenal. I think that's the important thing.
Okay, all right. Well, I think we are well over time. I just want to ask Siddharth if he has any quick addition, and then we'll close this panel.
One thing I would like to add, and especially where I see the potential of AI, is we are going towards a direction where AI can help turn education into play. So the whole area of gamification. And that is something very important to keep an eye out on. The other thing which Mohandas ji said, I would like to just add to that, maybe what we can think of is learning management systems at scale. So 100,000 or 200,000 schools with dashboards where you can have a look at, and we are talking of LMSs in terms of corporate structures, in terms of one college or university, but at scale. So that's one thing. And obviously, I hope that in 10 years, that's my hope, that we will have personal learning assistants, which can assist the teacher and the student, which are AI enabled for everyone. And yeah.
One sentence.
So my one sentence is, in all of these, our core focus, the key customer is the child. So that one child sitting out there, it's all for the sake of it. So if we actually make that into dashboards and if we make that into graphs and so on and so forth, look at it from that perspective. If imagine somebody did that to us. So there is that big complexity here.
Right.
You know,
So
the child doesn't want to go to school.
Right. Okay, so let's, well, I think we started with a very clear articulation of the problem, and we have ended with a variety of views on how to solve it. So you can clearly see that this is an area up for grabs. There is tremendous opportunity here. There is no solution that's either probably on an extreme in terms of all technology or all human. There's probably no solution that's all centralized versus all decentralized. So that we're back to the ancient wisdom of the middle path. So that's the journey ahead of us. Let's thank everybody on this panel. Thank you very much.